Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, because we all love game nights with our family and friends. But when you play solo games, then every night can be a game night. Check us out along with other great podcasts at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 74, Charterstone and Gaia Project Automas, with Morten, Monrad, Pederson, and David Studley. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This week, we have an episode that we've been wanting to do for a very, very long time. Because the Automa Project, the Automa Factory, is well known to us solo gamers and people who like to play big, heavy games and not let the lack of people stop us from doing so. So without further ado, I would like to introduce two people from the Automa Factory company. This is Morten, Monrad, Pederson, and David Studley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having us.
Good morning.
Good morning and afternoon and time zonies and all sorts of stuff going on.
Good afternoon, guys, and good morning.
Time is bunk.
Yes, time is like the spoon in the Matrix. It doesn't exist. So Anthony really wanted to be on the show, but fortunately, a child apocalypse has struck yet again. So we are going to get into the Automas for Charterstone and Gaia Project. Gaia Project in particular is one that Anthony wanted to really talk about. We'll get to that, and we'll do the best that we can once we get there. So before we get started, we have two gentlemen who have been really influential and important in the solo community. So we wanted to get to know them first before we get into the games. So I'll leave it open. You guys want to introduce yourselves and how you got into this whole gaming thing?
You want to go first, David?
No, you go first, Morten. It's your company.
Well, there's the first intro. Who owns the company?
Yeah, well, it's legally it's a one-man company with just me and David and our other guy, Linus. They are sort of freelancers, but that's just the simplest way to do it at the moment in relation to accounting. But anyways, I have been a gamer all of my life, basically, which means I've been playing games for something like 4 decades by now. And so some years ago, I started getting serious about it, started designing, started blogging about it, and got into touch with Jamie Stegmaier, and then it went from there.
All right. So you mentioned that you had gotten in touch with, or you had started the blog. So we'll definitely get into that. That's my introduction to you, actually. The blog is Thematic Solitaires for the Spare Time Challenge on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, that's the shortest title I could come up with.
And that is how David found you, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct. I discovered. Let's see. I'm a relatively new gamer, maybe 6 years or so. I started playing. I was thinking about doing things other than video games. My son was getting older and spending too much time in front of the screen, so I discovered analog gaming and stumbled on solo gaming because my son was still too young to enjoy some of the stuff that I was learning to like, and so through that I discovered Morten's blog. And he was working on, I guess, the Automa for viticulture when the Tuscany expansion was being done. And I reached out to him and said, hey, can I play test? And he indulged me, and I got to start working with him. And, I haven't looked back since. I mean, I learning from the master, it's kind of hard to give up on that. So right. Ever since then, we've been working on projects, and I've been trying to take a increasing role to the extent that now I'm getting to take leads on some of the projects, and I love it. It's fantastic work if you can get it.
Yeah, like you can actually do a little bit of work on a ton of games doing what you guys do, which is a very enviable position.
Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it.
All right. So I am we'll talk about the Automa. I don't want to get into like a whole discussion of what the Automa is. I think there's a lot of knowledge on there about that. I would refer you in particular to Morten's blog as well as to the Board Game Design Lab podcast. Mort was on there on May 3rd to talk about what an Automa is and all that kind of thing. But just to give the general definition of it, it's a deck of custom cards that simulates a dummy opponent. Is that like a good enough one sentence encapsulation of what an Automa does?
Yeah, in one sentence, that's fine.
There you go.
That's good.
Okay, so again, a deck of custom cards, a dummy opponent, and it creates opposition. You know, it's not there to necessarily beat you. It's there to kind of give you get in your way so that you can you're challenged and you're moving forward, and you can actually play the game against the feel of a real opponent. So that's basically it, and that's what these guys do, and that's what you do for a lot of games. Where has the Automa appeared? You mentioned Viticulture. What other games have had published Automas?
Well, we did Between Two Cities, Scythe, Gaia Project. Did I miss any, David? Charterstone, of course.
Yeah. Those are the ones that are out there.
Yeah, and then we have, of course, working on more, and we have the expansions for those games.
Cool. All right, so let's take a step back for a second. I wanted to ask about just the Automas in general. So you said before that the Automas have been in a bunch of the Jamie Stegmaier games, and now obviously they're doing really well because you're being asked for more Automas. So, we'll talk about that at the end of the show, or at least allude to it, because I know you guys can't really share too much. But I wanted to get your sense of like the fan feedback that you guys have gotten for this whole Automa thing. Have you gotten this kind of, oh, thank you, has it been like mostly positive, or are there some people where it's like, no, keep these bots out of my game, or these bots don't make sense, they are doing X, Y, and Z? Like talk a little bit about the fan reaction to Automas.
Well, it's been awesome. If you had asked me 5 years ago whether I expected to get fan mail, then I would have laughed you out the room. And I do get fan mail now. It's very weird. It's a very weird experience to get that. But of course, we also get negative reactions and people who think that solo gaming is weird. But overall, the reactions we get are from people who do play solo games, and from those we have overall gotten very positive reactions. So I've been blown away. I know it's cliche to say that, but I have. I just did this for fun 4 years ago, something like that, and I hadn't counted on anyone really liking the first Automa I did, or wanted to play it more than once as a novelty, and maybe 10 people would try it out, something like that. And that's not how it happened.
What would you say has been the most consistent criticism that you've encountered of the Automas? So I'm imagining a scenario, I guess going off of a lot of the feedback I read on BGG and elsewhere, of players saying that this is a little bit too random, like you pull a card and the bot does some crazy thing that a human player would never do. So that's one that I've seen. Is it that one, or would you say that there's something else that you've seen that kind of occurs again and again in terms of criticism?
Yeah, I say realism. Lack of realism is the main complaint. This is not a coin game. We're not doing coin bots. We want them to play as fast as possible for the human player. We want the human player to spend his time on his own turn, not on the Automa's turn. And so we make them as simple as possible. And we do this. We focus on the interaction points in the game and try to abstract away everything else, which means that the Automa will seem like it's doing weird things behind the scenes because it's breaking the rules. But we try to get the interactions reasonably right, and then it's just the other stuff that looks weird. But that's definitely a criticism that we get, that it acts unrealistically in some cases, and also that it's random, because it is random.
It's almost like playing a madman.
We try to avoid that, but it is random. It depends a lot on which game we're talking about.
If you look at our rule books, every one of them starts with the Automa does not follow the rules. And that's by necessity. I mean, Morten said, we're not building coin games. I mean, every once in a while when we're brainstorming stuff out, one of us will, Linus or I will be throwing out all kinds of ideas that, to add realism. And one of the other ones, usually Morten, will say, no, we need to strip that away. And often the refining process while we're balancing is taking rules away so we can get it as simple as possible. And of course, there's a trade-off there. If we were building an AI in a computer, I could totally beat you in Terra Mystica every time. If I could, design all those rules and calculate all that. Well, maybe not. But, when we get to the Automa, what we're trying to do, like Morten said, this is the first lesson he taught me, and you'll read all about this in his blog. We're just focusing on where do the players interact and trying to just model that interaction so that they feel like they're playing. And it doesn't have to be realistic. It has to have the effect that would have.
So it's a realism versus simplicity, if that's probably the most pithy way of saying it. So like you can, like I think of D&D, where you can either have your really complicated GURPS level rule set where it's like just, okay, you hit the armor, you hit this, hit that, but then you're spending 45 minutes figuring out whether a die roll actually hit you. Or you can go completely abstract. It doesn't feel, you get one number for your defense and you roll it and either you hit or miss. So that's way more unrealistic, but it's faster and simpler and increases the game experience. So is that kind of the tension that you're describing and how do you feel like you've accomplished hitting that tension?
I'd say that's a good description. So we try to do it as simple as we can while still retaining the feel of the core interaction. So we're definitely leaning towards simplicity more than towards realism.
Like as an example of that, when you look at Scythe, I think one of the most challenging things we've had to deal with, when designing an Automa is the movement system in Scythe, where the Automa's characters and mechs move and how far and whatnot. And I always think the way we designed it, it felt like an amoeba. Okay, so your character is not only can't use tunnels, he has a lot of these restrictions, the Automas. So what we do is we just have it grow, that blob of the Automa's forces moving towards you, as opposed to just having to follow all of the rules. We abstract it to a sense where you're still getting that feeling of he's moving towards the factory, he's moving towards us, or she.
Mm-hmm. And you can make predictions about where it will be going like you can with a human player, right? With a human player, you will have at least some guesses about where it'll go. And with the Automan side, it's the same thing. You know that, well, if it will move a mech next time, it'll go here. And if it moves its character, it'll go here. And if it moves a worker, it'll go here. You don't know which of those actions it'll take or whether it'll attack. But you can... you know where it'll go if it does a specific action, and you know something about the ratio of the different actions, and you know which cards have already been played. So you have some predictability in relation to what it's going to do, where it's going, just like you would a human player. You don't know it for sure, but you have some rough ideas of where it might be moving.
So it's a Mad Men, but it's a somewhat predictable Mad Men.
Yeah.
Right. It's not purely random. That's right. It's not purely random.
No, it moves based on the current position. So there's randomness in which action it'll take, but then how that action is applied is most definitely not random. There's a system to that you can predict, and you can predict a lot about its overall, not a lot, but you can predict some of its overall behavior like you would a human player. Because you could guess at a human player's strategy in his situation, because you could think about what would I do if I was in his position. So both the human player and the Automa can be predicted to some extent.
Okay, I think that should do it in terms of a high-level view of Automas. Once again, I encourage you guys to check out Morten's blog, Thematic Solitaire for the Spare Time Challenge over on BGG. Check out Morten's appearance on Board Game Design Lab and a few other places as well. I believe he's been on Ludology as well, so probably should have mentioned that one first. Anyway, games. Hotness, anyway. Charterstone. So let's get into talking a little bit about Charterstone. So I guess I'll ask it in terms of every Automa is different. You designed the Automa for Psy, the viticulture, and all this. How did you react when Jamie kind of gave you guys directives to say, okay, now I'm going to need an Automa for 12 different games. Go.
Yeah. Well, he just don't tell us how we should do it. That's our decision. He doesn't get involved in the solo modes. But he tells us, could you make us Automa for this game? And then I tell David, go do all the real work while I sit here and do some gaming.
That's what the apprentices are for.
Yeah. It's not quite true because I also make Linus, our third partner, do some of the work. Oh, but yeah, that's the gist of it. Jamie makes the games or publishes someone else's game, and we will then do a solo mode for that. And we've also done it for Feuerlandspiele for Gaia.
So how was it to design an Automa for an evolving game? Was that a particular kind of challenge? Did that take a long time, or did that come together relatively quickly?
Well, would you call it quickly, David?
Yeah, no, not quickly. It certainly had additional challenges. Less about its evolving nature and more about evolving with it and protecting spoilers. I found, I think some of that were the bigger challenges than the evolving nature. Evolving nature really speaks to strength and whatnot. So if you have a player who plays against one of our regular Automas, we'll want to add the ability to have it grow in strength over time so that as they get better, the Automa gets better. So, I equate the work that we had to do in Charterstone to something similar to that, where it had to evolve strength-wise. But dealing with the sudden changes and the rule changes, that was a little trickier.
Mm-hmm. What I found with the Charterstone Automa, I guess from a mechanical perspective, I do want to kind of issue a little bit of an apology, because I had in my head when we did the Charterstone episode, it's like, okay, we're not going to talk a lot about Automa because we're going to have the interview with you guys. So I ended up not talking enough about my real feelings towards the Automa. As a mechanical thing, I really liked it. I really liked in that game how it kind of grew. Like, you guys found a way to let it grow. So like, as you got better, it got more, and then it was able to scale back. I don't want to give spoilers. So we'll be being a little bit general, but it does kind of have that flexibility in terms of how much it pushes you, but it does push you. And I was reminded of a thread that I saw on the Race for the Galaxy bot. Now, that's not an Automa. That was just dice on a piece of paper. The Race for the Galaxy bot also really pushed you. So, like, I think the way Tom Lehman approached that was, okay, here's a bot. It's going to cheat its face off, and it's going to force you. Here, it's 6-point development for free. It doesn't have to do anything. Not gather resources, nothing. And it's going to force you to play better. So, like, there were a lot of people that were complaining on his threads, and they were like, oh, this is too hard. The bot is unfair. And he's like, yes, of course the bot's unfair. Life's unfair. Improve your play. So, I got that feeling from the Automa in this game, where I was like, okay, we were doing our thing, and then we put an Automa in, I think it was like the third game, and that Automa punished us. Like, boom. Whoa, where'd that come from? So then it kind of like set our minds, okay, we have to play like fast, we have to play, like with really like, challenging our efficiency. Is that kind of how you approach Automa design in general, where it's like, okay, we really need this to kind of push the players and challenge them?
In solo games, I like to challenge people, but I don't feel that it's that pushy in Charterstone compared to a human player. But you say the problem here is that you can do different play styles, and the Automa has to choose one of them. So if we make an Automa that doesn't try to win, play slowly, then players who try to win, who try to play optimally, well, they will just beat it and have a boring time. So there's a balance to be struck there. And I think we needed to be good enough to at least challenge players who play to win. And I think there's also another issue here, that you don't want the player to unlock and build everything in the first game even though he might like to do that because it would feel great to build all the stuff at once, but that would mean that you don't have as much stuff to build later on.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to pace the game to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
So we want the player to be pushed somewhat, but we also want him to be able to build some stuff. So that was what we were aiming for, a balance between the two. And then, of course, the question is, did we hit that balance? That's completely different.
But at least that's what the goal was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would add.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things to that. Just that, just echoing what Morten said. You could have a game group playing Charterstone, and the game is designed that if one of them feels they're winning, they can push through to the end of the game. And we needed to accommodate for that a little bit. Now, what we've heard, and it sounds like your play group, or the way you wanted to play, you wanted to kind of relax and let the game linger a little bit longer so that you could unlock some stuff. But in most play groups and whatnot, you have that one person who wants to win, and they will push the game along. And in general, that is the focus, or one of the focuses of the Automa, is to put that pressure on the other players that you can't necessarily get everything you want accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Actually, our play group, we did have the one guy who did push things along. All of a sudden, I think after we're 15 minutes into the game and he's out of influence tokens and he's pushing along that progress thing and oh my God, we're trying to build buildings. We got to do this, and this.
And then the second thing I would say about, Charterstone in particular is we had one shot at it. Mm. So that pace where, if we're designing an Automa for Scythe, if the game runs too fast or too slow, it's too easy, it's too hard, your next game will be right. Well, we had to do that through the 12-game campaign, but each individual game, we didn't get a second shot at it. You've unlocked those boxes, you've pasted those stickers. And so it's definitely a bigger challenge, in the legacy situation.
Yeah, so I guess my main kind of thing with the game was not to necessarily go at a leisurely pace, but I think the game, the way the buildings were basically in a deck, and it got added, and then a bunch of other stuff, spoiler, got added to this deck, and it's pretty fat. So it takes a long time, the game takes a long time for the buildings to come out, and meanwhile, I guess it's not a criticism of the Automa in general, but it's a criticism of, well, not a criticism, but there will be that player, right, who does push you along and get want to rack up the points and point. And so are you building the village that is, you can have that kind of some kind of personal investment in? Are you building, are you exploring the deck? Do you really have options, or are you playing a point scoring game with a couple stickers? So I kind of, I guess for me, I guess that reveals kind of what kind of gamer I am. More of a thematic, imaginative, want to tell a story type gamer, and that's an expectation thing on me. I think that in terms of what you guys were able to do with the Automa, it was pretty effective.
Thank you. Well, you say it's a Euro game, so
it's a Euro game,
and so they tend to focus on mechanics, right? Try to put in theme. But I'd say they are focused on the mechanics.
Okay.
And then you can see that in Charterstone there's some theme, but they're definitely mechanics.
Mm-hmm. All right. So is there anything else in terms of the Charterstone Automa development that you guys ran into that was interesting, that maybe honestly, just to pull back the curtain a little bit, this isn't just for a general audience, this podcast. A lot of different designers, people who are just kind of getting at it, they actually like to design their own Automas. There's tons of them. There's an Automa for Takenoko. There's an Automa for Jaipur. Automa for Near and Far, which, as you will have heard, that was my favorite Automa, fan Automa of the year, fan variant. So were there any particular lessons for maybe people who are designing Automas for themselves, or who are just interested, that you got lessons that you got out of the Charterstone experience?
Well, I think there's one lesson which I learned but didn't learn. So you talk about this pacing, that it feels like the Automa is pacing you with points, forcing you to score points quickly. And I think a major factor in that is perception, because if a human player in Charterstone will tend to score lumpily, right? He get 5 points and then nothing for 3 turns. And if we do that with the Automa by a random card draw, we risk that one Automa will get all the points because it draws the cards with points on, and the other gets nothing. So instead we have to spread out the points on each card, so the Automa scores a little bit each turn, but that gives you the feeling of it just pacing you, running all the time, which a human player doesn't do. So that was, I think, one of the issues I had with the Charterstone Automa that I didn't know how to fix, because this constant pacing is unnatural compared to a human player, but for balancing reasons, we had to have it. So thinking about how you can solve that in a specific game, I think, is rather an important lesson to think about for me in Charterstone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess piggybacking onto what Morten said, to me, a lot of this is related to expectation and managing expectations. A number of the issues that I would have changed or that I would have wanted to change in the way the Automa worked for Charterstone is in what people's expectations are versus the reality. You have a battle each game, and the Automa really comes out swinging in the first couple of games, and that was troublesome to a lot of people, how powerful the Automa was. And what I continually tell people on the boards is focus on the campaign. That, yes, the Automa comes out hard and strong in the beginning, but your focus is on building your best charter so that you win overall. In hindsight, having that progression, have it come out a little bit softer, a little bit easier, I think I would have done in the future. Mm-hmm. With Scythe, you have a fierce competitor, and if you lose, you try and figure out how to do it again. A lot of people didn't like, while they were learning the game, coming up against something that was, that powerful, even as they will build up their own strength and learn to eclipse it over the course of the campaign. I think, I personally underestimated how off-putting that would feel. Mm-hmm. But again, that's really very specific to a legacy, campaign-style game that we're talking about with Charterstone.
And I think that Charterstone is essentially kind of a family weight and it gets to around middleweight-ish towards the end of it in terms of complexity. So, having to kind of navigate those different weights, I imagine, is also a thing. So I wanted to use that to transition to probably the heaviest game that you guys have done an Automa for. Is this, you laugh a little bit there. Was it like orders of magnitude heavier than some of the other projects?
I don't think it's that much worse than Scythe. It's heavier, but I don't think an order of magnitude heavier.
Okay. So we're talking about Gaia Project, which is the second implementation of the Terra Mystica system published by Z-Man Games. Terra Mystica in space. So maybe talk a little bit about... so just a full disclosure, Anthony wanted to be on the interview. He's played Gaia Project. I have not. He did forward me the questions, so I'm going to let these guys kind of talk through what the Gaia Project Automa is, how they designed it, and kind of what it's given to you. So let's start off just basically. Tell us how the Automa works in terms of the 17 cards and whatever else you have to make it work.
Yeah, sure. It's very different than our regular Automas, than the previous ones, because in all the previous ones you have a fixed deck, and then you draw one card each turn and carry out what's on that card. But in Gaia, we wanted to do something different, because in the Gaia project there are a lot of different actions, a lot of different strategies you could do, but mainly there are a lot of different actions that are very different. And a human player won't just take action 1, action 2, action 3, action 4, and so on. No, they will focus on specific of these actions as part of their strategy. And our normal Automa approach here would just basically to do an average of all strategies, because you just randomly take one card and it's always the same set of cards that you go through. But it would feel weird in a game that's so much about focusing on a specific set of the actions. So we wanted to sort of mimic that in that experience in the game. So we made a smaller deck that is actually getting used from the beginning of the game. I think you have 17 cards total, but you start with a deck of 6 or 7 of those. And most of them are fixed, and one is added by random. This means that from the beginning you know something about which actions the Automa will take. Perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself here, but you get a bit more control as you then add in one more card at a time. You can sort of build a strategy that way by adding in one card at a time, so it will end up focusing on the actions that are in the deck instead of focusing on all the actions, because all of the actions will be in the deck. And then the second difference is that we made this 2-card system, where you always have 2 cards face up, the support card and the action card, and you put them together, one on the right, one on the left, and then you focus on the middle part of the game. So you use the right side of one card, the action card, and the left side of the other card, which is the support card. And so the action chosen is on the action card, and then you could say the tiebreakers are on the support card. So it might say colonize a planet, and then the support card will choose which planet to colonize. So you also get more variation that way. Instead of in our other games, it would tell you on the action card which planet to colonize. But here you get more variations because we pair cards to make that complete decision. And then when the turn is done, you remove the support card, and the current action card becomes the support card of the next turn. Did I summarize that, David?
Sounds about right to me. I mean, you went over some of the interesting innovations that I think we should probably get to because of the style game it is.
I guess what you're talking about is simulating like different opponents. So like in the Charterstone Automa or in the Viticulture Automa, it is not like it's simulating a different player or different mat or whatever it is. In Gaia Project, that's kind of half the game, right? is looking at your particular player power. If you're specialized in terraforming, or if you're specialized in exploration, or you're specialized in conquering and gathering. I've played Terra Mystica. I'm trying to think back to like my experience with that game, but like every single player power was focused, and that was one of the things that Anthony wanted to know the most was how was I mean you're saying how like you did it. And how difficult was that to just do that for every single different character?
Well, so in thinking back to Terra Mystica, I mean, there are soulmates. So, there are a lot of parallels there and a lot of the same design challenges. And the thing that I believe people love about Terra Mystica, not only the factions themselves, but just that there are so many paths. And so what Morten was talking about with the way we kind of manipulated cards by starting from a small deck and building, and then piecing together 2 cards to make kind of a much larger base of possible actions, was to try and model the fact that you could do all these things and still win and still garner points. As far as the specific factions, that's when we had what we call our faction action, which everyone loves to say. I don't know why. But
like Action
yeah,
Jackson,
exactly.
It sounds really.
And so, one of those actions, I mean, it might take just kind of generic actions, but every once in a while it would take its faction action. And that's where we were able to kind of build in personalities for each of. We actually did it for 7 factions. We penciled out, and we have the other ones, but we ran out of time to test them. So we have the the basic 7 factions are in the game, and basically what we did was we tried to take the essence of what the faction would accomplish for a particular player, and add that essence. We didn't necessarily have it do exactly the kind of things that their special powers would do, but make it feel like if you were using this, how would that change the way you scored? How would it change the way you evolved across the board?
Yeah, can I butt in here?
Please.
Yeah, because you could say that the Automa isn't really playing the Gaia Project. It's playing another game that has a lot of similarities to Gaia Project, but it's a simpler game. And that also means that the faction actions have to be different than the racial actions in the game that the human is playing. So we need to adapt those racial actions to something that fits in the simpler game that the Automa is playing, because behind the screen, the Automa is playing a game that is much less complicated than the human player is playing, but it in the places where two players interact, you could say that the Automa is playing the same game, but behind those interactions is a game that's much simpler. And so, since it's another game it's playing, it also needs some other rules for these racial abilities. So, as David said, we're just trying to get the feel of the racial ability, but we're not actually doing the racial ability.
I guess among the different races, like among the 7, was there one play style that was a little bit especially challenging from a design perspective?
David, you can say if you disagree, but I think the one of them that focuses on research.
Absolutely. The different factions had different challenges, and I was going to kind of give you an example of that answers your earlier question. With something like the Ferox, we actually were able to do pretty much just what a human player would do with that. Then there are the Itars, which we bounced around ideas for a while because there just wasn't a simple way to emulate them. I was playing against them, and I just had this vision of them spinning the power balls, just like in Terra Mystica, you're spinning the power tokens around and around and again. And that's kind of what the Itars were doing. So ultimately what we did was we just used those power tokens. So for them, they are just continually taking power actions. And at first that felt kind of boring. But ultimately when you play against it, it can be really devastating to your strategy because you need to use those actions as well. So it actually turned out to be one of my favorite ones to play against. For some of them, it was just the essence. What does it feel like? If they're just spending credits and garnering a lot of coins, instead of having them actually take those actions, we just give them extra victory points every time they use credits or whatnot. And I think they turned out nice. I enjoy playing against all of them.
Well, definitely, as does Anthony. I feel so bad. He was looking forward to this. Get better soon, man. You need to get that flu vaccine. All right. Okay. So was there anything else in terms of the Gaia Project Automa in particular that you wanted to share with the audience, developing it, testing it, especially on the testing? Like, we haven't talked a lot about testing. These must be you must have to do this a lot in order to really get the balance right.
Yeah, definitely. But it might not be as hard as you think because we are not designing a game. We are being given a game that's already well balanced. So for the human and the races the human plays, the game is already balanced. So what we need to do is make sure that the Automa scores roughly the right number of points to make it competitive for players at different skill levels. So we have different difficulty levels in the game. And then we need to avoid degenerate behavior. Right, so it shouldn't go turtling in one corner and not interact with the player at all, and shouldn't be able to just swarm all the way around the player in 2 turns. And the player shouldn't be able to do that to the Automa either. But if we can avoid such degenerate behavior and just control the score reasonably well, then it's balanced because the game itself is balanced. And balancing the scores are not all that hard because we sort of decouple the scoring, at least to some extent, from what actions the Automa is doing. David mentioned the power actions, where when you do a power action, the Automa doesn't really do anything with it because it would normally just give it a personal benefit, so to speak. But we then model that, but by giving it some points, and so we can control the scoring fairly well, but just adjusting the number of points the Automa scores for each card, because we know fairly well how many actions how many turns it'll take in a full game, and then we just control the number of victory points on each card to give it the number of points that will be sort of correct for an average human, and then an expert level where we give it some more that we think goes well with what an expert human would do, and we could get numbers from Feuerlandspiele about which kind of scores different experience levels of humans would get. So while of course it was a lot of work, it wasn't as hard as you might think.
Yeah, okay. It's funny that's one of the things that I'm always looking for is what would an average human get and what is a superhuman going to get? Because I play games just to have fun. I am not the kind of player that is going to max it out. And so I'm always worried that we're making it too easy or, to the extent too hard. I want to find that sweet spot where the expert player is going to feel challenged and the average player is going to feel challenged, and have it set up just that way. I mean, we're really lucky as far as playtesting. We've always gotten a wonderful response. And we have great playtesters and plentiful. And, we do a lot of the work ourselves, but, we couldn't do it without them, and they're just awesome.
All right. So I think that's all of my questions about Automas in general and about the two games in particular. Thank you guys for sharing your expertise. I know I'm going to get a little bit of a vague answer on this one, but I got to ask it. What's in the future? I mentioned when we were talking before that there's 4 different projects. I know you can't tell me the project, but maybe you can kind of describe in general, like what types of games. Is it more Euros? Is it more heavy Euros? Are there family stuff? Is there other genres that you guys are exploring? That kind of thing?
Well, on my table right now, in front of me, is codename Eat My Shoe.
Oh, I'm glad you're playing that. Awesome.
Yeah. No, so we have Euro games coming. The one I think we can talk the most about is the upcoming expansion for Scythe, the 3rd expansion.
Rise of Fenris, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we have that in external playtesting right now. That's the project that's furthest along right now. And it made quite a different experience from the previous Scythe game. It has a lot of... Sorry, what?
Would it be inappropriate to say it's awesome?
Yeah, that would be inappropriate.
I'm sorry. Sorry, edit that out, please.
No, so it has been actually, the challenge has reminded me a lot about the Charterstone challenge. And then we have a family-style game coming out that we're working on. We are working on a Euro game, not by Jamie, and the family game is also not by Jamie. And David is taking lead on this Euro game. And then we have an expansion for Euphoria coming up. Mm-hmm. And that has been our labor of trouble. It has been going on for 3 years, on and off for 3 years, that expansion.
I'm sorry, it's funny how things could be, like, you guys with the Automas, they can be pretty significant in development, and then what comes out is a deck of 10 cards or something.
Yeah.
If we do our job right.
Yeah.
Right.
The hundreds of hours can go into one Automa, and it's a small deck of cards. That's a bit crazy to think of, that the product is so small. But we put in, I would say, a few hundred hours per Automa, and then we're talking about perhaps 150 to 300 playtests by external playtesters, not our playtest, but those of other people. So it's a huge amount of time that goes into just one Automa. It's because of the way we do it, right? We are not the designers of the game who does this as a small add-on. We are a team of people who do this as the thing we do, right? We can be 2 to 5 people working on one solo mode for one game for quite a long time, right? It's our product, so we spend an amount of time on it that I'm guessing that designers who also make a solo mode more time than they will have available.
Morten brings up a very important point. He's very strict about is that we're working on someone else's design. We don't mess with that design. What we are doing is putting together those 10 cards to model the way they design it. We don't fix anything we may feel is wrong. We don't change it to work as a solo game. We do our best to simply model what the interactions would be like against other players.
All right, so that basically covers everything that I had. I hope, Anthony, you are happy with my presentation of your questions.
Get well, Anthony.
He'll be back next week. I'm sure he'll be back next week. But thank you guys so much for making the time. Thank you for coordinating time zones and coordinating kids and all that kind of stuff. This was really great.
Thank you very much for having us. And I really like your questions on Gaia. So pass that on to Anthony. I'm guessing it was some of his questions. It was made me think about some things I hadn't actually thought about.
Oh, no, I was just echoing, thanks for having us, and it was fun. And awesome. Anthony should get well soon.
Yeah, +1 to that.
That's going to do it for another episode of Every Night is Game Night. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you one more time to David and to Morten for taking time, sharing about the Automa Factory. Go ahead and check them out. If you are a publisher, they are willing to make your game solo. Obviously willing to put hundreds of hours into this stuff and taking some of those hours to share some of their insights with us, which is really, really appreciated. So that's going to do it. If you want to reach out to us about this or any other episode, you can contact us at ENGN_podcast on the Twitter. We are on Facebook. We are on BGG. You can find us on everynightisgamenight.com, at our sister website, boardgamersanonymous.com. And yep, I'm going to ask for this every single time. Please rate. Go on to iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, wherever you can throw a rating. Give us 5 stars or however many stars you think we deserve. Drop a comment. We are totally available. We really want to get this out. We want to hear from as many people as possible about what we're doing. So we hope you enjoyed the episode. That's going to wrap it up. As Anthony would say at the end of every episode, go ahead and grab a game off that shelf and let's make every night a game night.